The date is June 25th, 2007. Our interview today is with George Maurice Abbott. The interview is taking place at the Bob Stump Veterans Medical Facility in Prescott, Arizona. In attendance are
Patsy Ray, camera operator.
And Shirley Hutter, I'm the observer.
and I am Guy Willis. Okay, with that, now we can start talking, George. Let's start with what part of the country you were raised in. Where did you enlist?
I was born in Lander, Wyoming, in 1919.
Right.
And my family were pioneers. My grandfather was the youngest of four boys that came to Wyoming, and they went up to South Pass, and what was a gold mining strike up there and so on, and so they worked on mines for a few years, and then they dropped down into Lander Valley and became ranchers.
Did they homestead there?
Yes.
So they came west working for the railroad and then went into the mines?
Right.
And then homesteaded to become ranchers?
Right, and they actually came from Missouri. Actually, the two older boys were born in Germany, and they were immigrants, and they lived in Missouri, and then the older boys went out to Wyoming, and when that was still
Go west, young man.
Wild West, yeah.
Okay, so then you grew up in Lander and went to high school there?
I went to high school there, and then I went to the University of Wyoming and took engineering, actually mechanical engineering, and then I graduated in 1942.
Was that a four-year university
Yes.
course then? So you started in 38?
Actually,
37?
I stayed out 1 year because Depression times we couldn't afford the 1 year, and actually I took ROTC. That you're required to take the first 2 years of ROTC, and I was picked to go on and become an Army officer, but because I stayed out that year, I didn't do that. And but later, when I graduated, I applied for the Navy, and as I told you before, I applied for to be an officer in the Navy, and they held it up for quite a while, and I finally, because I was afraid I would get drafted, I finally decided to enlist, and so on. And
So your enlistment was almost a year after Pearl Harbor, about 11 months after.
yeah.
And then you enlisted in Lander in the Navy.
Actually, I enlisted in Cheyenne.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I was working. Well, I didn't graduate in May because I had a few things to catch up on, and I finally graduated in August, and then I worked in Laramie on the airport for a month or so, and they were putting well, they were rebuilding the runways and so on, and that ran out, and so I went to Denver and actually, they sent me to Colorado Springs and worked on the air base down there. And when that ran off, I went back to Cheyenne and enlisted. And I took a couple of, actually took a week or so and went back to Lander, and then I came back to Cheyenne and enlisted, and they put me on the train that night, and I ended up in Farragut training.
So you went to boot camp at Farragut, huh?
Right.
Not too far away.
Well, it was an interesting place. Mm-hmm.
You know, there's only one boot camp now in the Navy, and that's Great Lakes. All those that you and I knew in World War II are closed, except Great Lakes.
I know. I have a grandson who went through boot camp about a year ago.
Great, great. So tell us a little bit about boot camp. Was there anything unique or unusual?
Well, the weather up in Idaho is rather interesting, I guess you call it. It rained a lot and so on, and when it also snowed, we had about a 2-foot snow there while I was there, and of course we had to march to Chow and do a lot of marching.
Well, but you were raised in Lander, so it couldn't have been too much different.
No,
otherwise.
It wasn't that much different.
But you were there all winter.
But just one little funny thing was that we were drilling on the drill field, and they gave different people a chance to give the commands, and so this one guy had to, was doing the thing, and he, I don't know, he lost his voice or something, and so the whole company plowed through this newly planted yard that they had, and it ended up about 2 feet deep of these, it was really funny.
So the commander didn't tell you to stop, so you just kept on going, right?
Well, yeah.
Did you go to any Class A training or specialist schools after boot camp?
After boot camp, I was sent to Quartermaster school, which was still at Farragut, on a different, well, there was about, I don't know, 5 or 6 different big...
different areas or campuses?
Different areas,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so I think let's see, graduated from boot camp. I went in November and graduated in February, I believe, and then there was from February to May, I was at Quartermaster school.
You know, that was a good course then, and you learned a lot in that time because it's a concentrated program. I know.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
And then you got your first assignment after that as a quartermaster seaman or quartermaster striker.
Well, I came out of a quartermaster as a third class.
Oh, really? Okay.
And was first sent to San Pedro just for a holding place. Stayed at Terminal Island, and the cell, not mine, but the cell right next to us, we were in the prison and on
right next to
Terminal Island, yeah. And I forgot what the name of the Al Capone. He had his name was scratched in the wall.
Huh. Well, there was a Navy brig there too at San Pedro on Terminal Island.
Yeah.
As well as a federal
Yeah.
prison.
And, but we were there a couple of weeks, and then we went to New Orleans, and we were there. Our ship came down, and it was built up in, around Chicago someplace, and came down the Mississippi River, and it was a PC boat, patrol craft.
So was the Navy crew on board in Chicago to bring it down the river, or was that a civilian crew?
A civilian crew brought it down.
And then the Navy crew took over in New Orleans?
That's right.
Okay, interesting. A lot of landing craft were built up along the Mississippi
That's
during
right.
War II and later in
Right.
New Orleans area. So you went aboard with, was the entire crew already together or assembled?
Yeah, we were all stationed not in New Orleans, but in it's across the river from New Orleans. Forgotten the name of it, but anyway, when it was we stayed in a land station until it was commissioned. The day it was commissioned, we all moved on to the ship, and I've forgotten, we went there. We didn't stay very long after that till we took off and went to Miami for shakedown cruise.
Independently or with a group of PTs?
Independently.
So you did the shakedown off Miami?
Yes.
Vacation, paid vacation, all the good spots, right?
Well, yeah, I think I got my American, what I have in my medals, you know, I have the American Theater and the Pacific Theater and the Japanese, anyway. We convoyed a convoy down to past Florida, down to Key West, and I think that's where we got our badge, because we did active duty and so on.
So the PT boat was operating independently as opposed to with a group or other escort?
Yeah, it always acted independently.
And what was your, well, number one, what was the crew, number of the crew? You had, what, 2 officers and?
We had 4 officers
Okay.
and about 60 men, I think it was.
60?
6.
Oh, 6, okay.
60.
On a PT boat?
Yeah.
That's a different PT boat than I'm aware of then.
Yeah. And I have a picture of one here. Anyway, and when we convoyed them down there, along with several other ships, and it continued to go on, but we stopped at Key West and did exercises with real submarines, and we went. We had these little on the front of the ship. We had these little bombs, and actually the ones that exploded were called Mickey Mouses, and the ones we used were little tiny ones, and they were called Minnie Mouses. And they didn't explode. All they did was we would use our sonar to locate the submarine, and then we would fire these little rockets, and they would go down. They wouldn't explode, but they could hear them if they hit the shell.
So these were simulating depth charges then?
Yeah.
What was the rest of the armament on your PT boat besides depth charges? Did you have torpedoes? Did you have a 3-inch gun? Or?
We had we didn't have torpedoes, but we had, depth charges. And we had a 3-inch gun, and we had a 140 millimeter anti-aircraft gun and 2 20s.
Okay. So your primary duty then was off Florida, and you were escorting convoys?
Well, actually, that was, I wouldn't say that was our primary duty, because the primary duty was shakedown and training. And they just happened to put us along with this convoy when we were going down to get this training at Key West. Anyway, we finished that, and we then went down through the Panama Canal and back up to San Diego. And then I got a leave, went home for a couple of weeks, and then we took off for Pearl Harbor, actually, to Hawaii.
Okay, so where are we now in time? Mid-43?
This was about, left San Diego in September.
Okay. 43.
43.
Right. And where you went to Pearl first, stopped over at Pearl.
Yeah.
And were you operating independently then, or did you go over with a group of ships?
We operated independently. And we were there for a couple of weeks, I've forgotten how much. And then they sent us down into the Gilbert Islands. There was one island called Christmas Island, and another one is called Funafuti, and that's where I never saw much action there, no, enemy action, but I did see there was a Jap plane came by and dropped a few bombs on the airport at Funafuti when I was there, and so on. And we were out patrolling out on a mile or so offshore.
Your patrol was primarily anti-submarine?
Yes.
Okay. So you were on that ship for what, about a year?
Yeah. After Funafuti, we went to Pago in Samoa, and we had to wait for some repairs. All our injectors went bad, and so on. And we were there over Christmas, and we had some interesting things because we had to wait for a while and so on. And I had one situation where we kind of went on we went on they call it a picnic. Where they took us not on our ship, but they took a group of people out on a boat out to a small island just outside of and we picked up shells and all those kind of things. But when it was time to go back, there was a storm that came up, and we, in order to get from the big boat, you had to come in on little 10-foot rowboats and so on. And getting back out, we had to pull those out along lines. We had lines running from the big boat to the coast, and I was running on one of these end of one of these lines here, and we had to run in order to get these. Probably had 10 people in a boat that went out and so on, and I took all my clothes off except my shorts because it was raining and so on and so forth. And of course, I put them in one of those boats, and of course that boat capsized. So I ended up getting back in the ship. I mean, not ship, but this boat was nothing on but my shorts. And when I got back to Pago, I had to walk all the way around the harbor, about 2 miles.
To get back to your own ship, huh?
To get back in my,
So,
in my,
but the original,
in my shorts. Nobody even noticed, I don't think.
no, but the original objective was a day off and a picnic on this beautiful little tropical island.
That's right, and pick up shells and so on.
And you probably had a ration of 2 beers and 1 Coke or something like that. You remember?
I don't remember that, but anyway. And, but anyway, from there we went to, well, let's see, we went to Noumea in New Caledonia, and we're just there shortly, and then we went down to the Solomon Islands, where Guadalcanal and Florida Island are, and so on. And it was there that, well, let's see, we were there for a couple of months, I think. And anyway, I got orders to go to Cornell University. However, they gave me about 3 weeks to get there, and it was impossible. So they kept me on the ship until they could get a replacement for me. In the meantime, we took one trip. We convoyed several ships way up to New Guinea almost. It was to New Britain, a little tiny island off on New Guinea, and so on. And anyway, when I got back, then I went to Guadalcanal, and they put me on a Liberty ship, and the Liberty ship went, actually it stopped in, not Pega, but, forgotten it, Fuji, and for a day, and unloaded some things, and then we went on to San Francisco, and then I took leave and went to, from home I went to Boston, and, well, wait a minute, no, I went to Cornell, Ithaca, New York, and when I got there, they said, well, the next class starts in about 3 weeks, so they sent me to Asbury Park in New Jersey, and that was it was a resort town, and they had taken over a couple of hotels, and we used to march down to the theater, which was on a pier, and so on, and anyway, I ended up doing all kinds of things. I was worked in the library, and I worked on a mangle.
It was just make-do work while you were standing by for 3 weeks.
Just
right?
we were standing by. They just made us work yet.
Back to the Liberty for a second. Were some of the holds arranged with bunks to handle troops, or you know, you had just 4 storage holds there? But did one have bunks tiered in there for troops?
We had. I mean, there was there was 4 bunks, 4 high, and we were in the forward part of the ship, and when the ship went up like that, and then it went down like that, and it made about that kind of noise when it hit, and so on, and it was, and we were on there about, I don't know, 3 weeks or so.
Were there many passengers? I mean, like 20 or 200 or 2,000 or?
would say there was 200 or 300 people.
Okay.
People on all military people.
Okay, were you in a convoy or operating by yourself again?
Operating by us, as I remember. I don't remember being in a convoy.
Okay, so you finished your tour on the PT as a quartermaster third.
Actually, I got quartermaster second.
You made second class on board there. Good, great. Did you have a separate rating of signalman, or did the quartermaster do both?
We had both.
Okay. You had signalman and quartermaster.
Yeah, actually, when we went to quartermaster school, there was signal. There's the same thing. Quartermasters and signalmen take the same course. It's just that the signalmen learn to be a little faster at it.
Well, and you had a different crew over here, one with cross flags and one with the...
That's right.
I drew you back in time a little bit, so if you'd like, go back to Cornell and your paid vacation at Asbury Park there. And then you started school when at Cornell? About? We're still in 43, I believe, to the end of 43?
Yeah, I was I can look it up here, but I think it was about July of 44.
Oh, 44, okay. Go ahead.
And, yeah, let's see. I'm a little confused on that. Let's see. Yeah. July 14th, I reported, no, July 8th. I came from Asbury Park to Cornell on July 8th, and we had indoctrination for a month, and then on August 4th, it says now a midshipman, so I became a midshipman in August, and graduated in November.
Oh, 44?
November, yeah.
Well, that was a relatively short time then at Cornell. I envisioned midshipman school being more like the V-12 or the Naval Academy.
Yeah.
But it was a
speeded up.
Well, but of course you already had your engineering degree, so it wasn't too much scholastic.
But we were in a separate, although we were together, we had, well, they graduated a class about every month, and each class was a company of men, and out of that company, in ours anyway, there was probably 150 men in the company, but there were only 20 of us were engineers, and the others were line officers and that sort of thing. And the engineers took a special course in steam engineering at the time. And when we graduated from that, we stayed in Cornell and moved to a different place in Cornell and took diesel engineering. And that was from November 9th till, let's see, March, middle of March.
Transition from quartermaster second to midshipman, what was your uniform change? Did you actually wear midshipman similar to the Naval Academy, the uniform, while you were at Cornell?
Yes, and it's interesting, rather, in my letters, because during the period while we were there, it took 2 or 3 months to get all our uniform together. They started out by giving us a couple of shirts and a couple pairs of pants, and that was it. And in the meantime, they took measurements for us and so on and so forth, and all these uniforms had to be put together. And it was we really didn't get our full complement of uniforms until we got out. And actually, we had to pay for them. I mean, we got, when we went to midshipman school, they gave us $10 a month, I think it was, and the rest of the money was kept separate. And at the end, when we got our commission, commission, we paid for our uniforms.
A uniform allowance.
Yeah.
Between your graduation at Cornell and your next duty, was there a time called OCS training, Officer Candidate Training, or like a officer's boot camp, or was there anything else in there, training-wise?
Well, I didn't go through that, but there were a lot of these people that were in midshipman school who had gone through what they call the WWII program in college, and in which they wore enlisted uniform and so on. And like when we went to Abbott Park, everybody was in enlisted uniforms, and when we came back, as I say, we gradually got our midshipmen.
A slow transition, and well, you started in July, so you probably got khakis as your initial issue.
Well, actually, yeah, well, you can call them khakis, but at the time they were gray.
Oh.
And but they were the same thing as the khakis. And
So anything unusual or eventful during your midshipman training at Cornell?
oh, I don't know. There was Cornell's built on a hill, and our dormitory was down at the bottom of the hill, and every morning we would march up the hill. And so on, and well, all the girls in at Cornell have big legs because they have to climb these hills, and we were more or less the same way, but it was rather interesting, and we had to. We didn't get a lot of leave and things like that, but we did have an opportunity to go to the student union and so on, but that was up at the top of the hill too. And then when we went, after we graduated and went into diesel school, then they moved us up into one of the main headquarters buildings which was up at the top of the hill. So then we were okay, except the mess hall was down at the bottom.
You got your exercise in.
Yeah, we got a lot.
You didn't need to drill too much. You got it just going back and forth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So after Cornell, what was your next duty, your next assignment? They sent me to Newport, Rhode Island, and I was on a small ship. I have a picture of it here. That was used to patrol the entrance to the harbor at Newport, Rhode Island. And sometimes we would go outside and go, I know we went up 50 miles, maybe up north along the coast up into Massachusetts and so on. And there were, well, I remember one time they had some problems up there where some, I don't remember what it was, but some ship was in trouble and the people were off the ship and so on, and they sent us up there. And then one night, I remember particularly because the fog moved in and we didn't get into the harbor quite in time, and we had, there was what you call it, a ship that was an anchor out just outside the entrance, and
The pilot boat, pilot ship probably.
well, and it was anchored, and it blew a foghorn about once every minute, I think it was, or so on, and we spent the whole night going around that ship with that foghorn going every minute, and so on and so forth. Another interesting thing about that ship was that we had 4 white officers, and the crew were probably 20 or so, were all black, and it was more or less an experiment at the time. And they were very good men on ship, but when they get off ship, I don't know, I can't say whether they're good or bad, but they ended up in the brig a lot.
What was the designation of this craft you were on? Was it an SC or a PC or something like that?
They called it AMC. I don't know. I think it was AMC. I've got a picture of it too.
Let's take a look. Can you get those pictures out, and we'll look at this notebook while we're at it.
This one, let's see, just a second if I can find that one. Anyway, here I have it written down here, AMC 37, called the USS Battle.
Okay.
And I spent one weekend where all the officers went on leave except me, and I was on the ship, and there was anyway, that was the weekend that President Roosevelt passed away, and I spent the whole weekend listening to the radio about
spring of 45.
The spring of 45. Yeah.
Good. Could you find that picture of the AMC 37? You know about where that is? If we can.
April 6, 1945.
Let's. Can you get that, Betsy?
Yeah, thank you.
While we're looking at this picture, this notebook consists of all the letters that George wrote home to his mother. So it's all very neatly organized in time sequence here. Anything else you want to say about the notebook itself, George, while The camera is looking at it. Can you see that all right, Patsy? A letter, stationery head from Cornell. Very thorough. Envelopes and 6-cent airmail stamps. U.S. Navy letterhead, somewhere in the Pacific, October 14, 1943. I like that definition, somewhere in the Pacific. Anything else you want to say about the notebook while we're on that subject, George?
I don't think so right at the moment. If we have time later, we can maybe go through it. Probably we won't, but like a typhoon that I went through and various things.
That's fine. Let's talk about that in sequence. Was the typhoon at what time during your travels?
That was, we better continue that. I was only on that ship in Newport for 1 month, and then I was sent to San Francisco and took a flying boat from there to Honolulu, and then I was there about 5 days, and then I took another flying boat to Saipan, and from Saipan I took a boat to Iwo Jima, not a boat, but an airplane, and we landed in Iwo Jima. Anyway, we went out to our ship, and they took us in a boat, small boat, and another fellow that had been inside Pan and was on this airplane when they went to Iwo. He dropped off in a small oil tanker that was tied up to a dock. Mm-hmm. And so I went out to my ship, and the fellow I relieved, he took off immediately, and so on. And anyway, we went to bed, and the next morning, it was getting rough. The ship, the coast was, the ocean was getting rough, and the ship had gotten up into the surf, although we were anchored. Somehow or other we got up into the surf, and so anyway, all of the other officers had gone up to the deck, but I didn't have anything to do, so I was a little later, and I just started out the desk, and the wardroom in this little ship, which was a YMS, a yard minesweeper made out of wood, and the wardroom wasn't more than this wide as this room, and there was a screen door on one side and a screen door on the other side, and I started out the door, and I looked out there, and there was a 20-foot wall of water coming at me, and so I stepped over to the side of the door, and the wave hit, and water went through that screen door about 3 or 4 feet high, and it went right on up and went out the other side, and so on. And anyway, they had measured on the inclinator that thing had, I think it hit the bottom of when it pushed up against that breaker, it hit a sand beach down at the bottom, and anyway, the whole ship had gone about 80 degrees over, and when it hit the bottom, it knocked it back up, so that but that was my start on that ship.
For the information here, the inclinator designates the roll of the ship. And
That's right.
a nice big pendulum up here.
Right.
So 80 degrees is almost all the way
That's
over.
like that.
Interesting. And that was your initiation.
That was my initiation. Some of the fellows down in their bunks down at the other, and down below got thrown clear out of their bunk into the bunk on the other side, you know.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Would you classify that as a tsunami wave now? Or how would you describe that? It was a single wave, or did you get a lot more following it?
Well, there was two of them, actually three, but the third one wasn't too bad. And I don't really know how to classify it, but
But it was a result of a hurricane or strong winds, or?
I think so.
Okay.
But I later found that this tanker where this fellow had gotten off and got on this tanker had capsized and everybody was lost.
And he had just gone aboard. Capsized at the dock?
Right at the dock.
And your ship, your YMS, was anchored out, but apparently dragged anchor because you were you were in toward the beach. What about getting it off the beach? How did that come about?
Well, they just when it hit the beach, it bounced back, and we were beginning to we were starting our engines, and we got our engines running at that time, and we were able to pull off.
So you didn't need to get a tug or a cable to pull you off the sand. And this was at Iwo Jima, this situation?
Yeah, this was about a month after the big landing.
Were there a lot of other ships and a lot of other activity there?
Yes. A lot of landing ships, and there was these YMS wooden ships. There was 8 of them, and this one article I have that you probably will copy here indicates that these 8 small wooden minesweepers went in, and well, there were other larger minesweepers who followed them, but anyway, they went in and cleaned out the beaches of mines before the landing ships went in. And the article exaggerates it a little bit. I think it says that they had a lot of fire, but the people that I were talked to said there wasn't, the Japs were afraid of fire because there were all these big battleships, and so out there they didn't want to
give away their location.
give away their locations.
Right. Interesting. So they didn't, the Japanese in the mountains didn't disturb the minesweepers. They just let them do their thing, huh?
Right.
So any other, you went ahead then and did your duty as on the YMS. What was this? Because you're a month after the invasion, so most of the mines are out of there.
Yeah. They, I don't really know why they were still there, but they hadn't been sent anyplace else, and so on. But when this happened, we never stopped. I mean, they told us to leave, and we went up to Saipan and then on to Guam, and pulled into Guam. And we were in Guam when the bomb was dropped and so on. And then we got orders of about a day or so after the bomb was dropped to go to Okinawa. And
Backing up 1 second here, if I may, on your trip from Iwo to Saipan, you were probably with a group of other minesweepers, or were you?
I don't remember, but I do. When we got up to Guam, I know we had all the minesweepers together, but I don't remember just on the way up, just whether they were together or not.
Well, if there was any concern about enemy activity, you would have traveled as a group. And YMSs were typically, I don't know the term, but a squadron or a group of ships under one command.
Yeah.
And you had the larger minesweepers with you also, right?
Yes.
Okay.
They weren't at the time, but we did have them later and so on.
So at Saipan, what was your function? What was the function of the YMS up there?
We only stopped there for a day, I think, and I remember going to shore, and of course I had been there before because when I was flying out, and I remember seeing they had a large place where they kept prisoners, and they had the fence was probably 8 to 10 feet high. It was with barbed wire and all this sort of thing, and the Japanese prisoners inside, and so on. I remember that.
You had seen that when you flew through
Yes.
Saipan.
And
You were privileged, now that I think about it, to be able to fly
yeah,
all of those places instead of being on a troop ship or.
that's right. Right.
Was the flying boat a civilian plane or a Navy plane? The flying boats that you traveled on?
They were Navy planes, and I remember they left San Francisco at 5 o'clock in the evening, and they said we're going to eat at 6, and they kept setting the clock back every hour, and finally when we did eat, I think it was about 10:30 on my watch, but anyway, we spent more time at Guam, and I did have the opportunity to go through a B-29 there and crawl through the, when you get into a B-29, you know that there's this
Tube down the middle.
big tube right down through the middle that's all made out of felt or some heavy cloth, and that's the way you get from, you have to crawl through that tube in order to get from the front to the back and so on and so forth.
The tube goes over the bomb bay, and
Yeah,
the cabin and the tube are pressurized. The bomb bay is not, so that's how you had to get from the forward part of the plane to the aft part of the plane. Back to Saipan, and I've never been there. Can you see Tinian from Saipan?
Tinian, I mean,
Well, it's in the same chain. It's the
yeah,
next
it's the same
island over.
chain, and I kind of think you can. I don't remember for sure, but all that whole string of islands, I think I think you can see one from the other.
Well, at the time you were there was a lot of activity on Tinian because it was just prior to the bomb dropping.
Yeah, that's true.
And
But-
you go ahead.
The place I went through the B-29 was on Guam, but
Well, I suppose, and I don't know this either, that Guam was a much larger air facility than Tinian had, so it
Mhm.
probably was a backup, and they're
Right.
fairly close, one to the other.
Yeah. Mhm.
But at the same time that you were in the area, they were preparing all
That's right.
the two bombs for Japan
That's right.
from Tinian.
Right. Mhm. Mhm.
And of course, you weren't privy to any of that information at the time.
That's right. That's right.
It's all ancient history now.
Mhm.
So at Guam, what was your activity?
Well, we did do some patrolling out in at the entrance to the harbor and so on and so forth. And when we'd go out there, sometimes we'd be out there 4 days, just going back and forth, and so on. And
What were you looking for on this patrol activity off Guam?
Submarines primarily. We had sonar equipment on our ship, and of course we'd use that and so on. So anything that would come through, we'd pick it up, you know, like the submarine or something of that sort. And then, as I say, that's where the bomb was dropped, and then a few days, wasn't more than a day or two that we're off to Okinawa. And Okinawa, we were south of the island. You could just barely see a little bit of land up in the north, but there was all this area of water which was rather shallow. You could use an anchor, in other words. And there was all these American ships down there, and that's where like the kamikazes came down. The last kamikaze came in the morning before we got there, and but anyway, there was probably 300 ships in that area, all anchored and so on. And
The invasion at Okinawa was April '44. So where are we in time now when you're at Okinawa?
in August, August '44.
Okay.
And
I think I'm wrong. It was the spring of '45 was the invasion.
yeah, not 44, it was August 45.
Right, yeah, I misled you. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Right.
May I ask a question about your experience when you were on Guam and heard about the atom bomb being dropped? How did you hear about that?
I don't remember, but I do remember, that's a good question. I have one letter in here that mentions Tokyo Rose, and we heard a lot of, we got a lot of information from Tokyo Rose, and that might have been one of them, I'm not sure, but anyway.
What was the reaction for you and the others that you were working with concerning Tokyo Rose?
Well, this one letter I have says something about, well, I remember one letter that I said, your letter says that Tokyo Rose might be Amelia Earhart. I said, she didn't talk like her, Amelia Earhart.
Did you have any idea what an atomic bomb was?
I'm not sure whether I did or not at the time.
Probably not, because the only shot before that was at
Yeah,
White Sands, and that was never revealed after,
Right.
until this was dropped.
At what time did you learn the amount of devastation that occurred in Hiroshima at the time of the dropping of the bomb?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure, but we got the idea that it was a big bomb, but I know that. But I don't remember exactly.
You know, on Guam, they had newspapers, so his information might have been newspapers or local radio station even. But it's more interesting if it came from Tokyo Rose.
It could have been, I'm not sure.
Where were you at the end of the war?
Well, I'll go on.
No, that's fine, go ahead with the sequence after,
Yeah.
we're at Guam now, and you heard about the
Yeah, and then we went up to Okinawa.
Okinawa.
And we were there, and there's little interesting things like these. We had a little 10-foot boat that, of course, our ship was only about 80 feet long or so, but we had a little 10-foot boat. And these 8, wasn't just the 8 wooden minesweepers, but others. Anyway, somebody swiped our boat. Somebody put, and so we sent somebody out, and we went and swiped their boat, and so on and so forth, you know. And but that's just another little incident. But we got orders to leave Okinawa, and we, in order to get away from this area where all these ships were, we had to go south through a sort of a channel which was marked by buoys on each side and so on. And as we were going down here, that was probably had to go 8 miles or so to get down out before we could turn left. And as we were going down south, here comes about, I don't know, 5 or 6 big battleships. They were going east.
In the channel, and that you were sharing, right? You were going one way and they were going the other.
No, we were going at right angles.
Ah.
And we were going this way and they were going this way. And as we came down here, they were still going, and seemed like, I think when we finally turned and went parallel with them, we were probably, I don't know, 800 feet from them or so, but it seemed like they were just like so, you know. And
Go ahead.
anyway, they were headed for Tokyo to the surrender. We were headed for Korea, and so anyway, we went parallel with them for about 20, 30 miles, and then we veered, I don't know whether they veered off or we did, but anyway, we kept getting farther apart, and we ended up going up through into Korea. And we had to sweep the mines out of Korea, primarily at Incheon Harbor, and so on. But there was a lot of islands all over the place, and so on. But it took us several days to get in there and so on. But anyway, we did go into Incheon Harbor, and it was another channel that you had to follow. And that particular day, we took turns, but whenever we went anywhere, one of these little wooden minesweepers went ahead because of magnetic bombs, of mines, that is, and so on. And we happened to be ahead one that time, and we went right up, really not into Incheon Harbor, but up, there was an island outside, and I have it described in one of these letters, and the Japanese who were there at the time, they had their flags out that to indicate that we were welcomed, and so on and so forth.
Was it like white flags, surrender flags? Or you mean signal flags?
Signal, well,
Okay.
not exactly signal flags, but you know, every ship has this bag of flags, and you put a whole series of them up there, and it means a certain thing.
If you're with the international, so they had the international code
Yeah.
that you could decipher.
Right.
Patsy was talking about the war being over. It was about 10 days after the first drop. Is that your recollection? And
Yeah.
so you found that, I know from personal experience, being on board a small boat or ship, you don't get much information about what's happening in the rest of the world.
That's right.
You live in a very...
That's right.
But her question is a good one. How did you learn about what was going on or what had happened? For example, when you saw the battleships, you know now that they were heading in for the peace treaty, and the Missouri was likely one of those ships.
Probably.
But at the time, you probably had no idea.
Well, I think we did, but I don't remember why or how.
Your communication was better
Yeah.
than some. So anyway, at the time you were going into Incheon, then it was the peace treaty was probably going on or taking place in Tokyo Harbor.
Yeah.
Or within a few days
Right.
of your experience there. So when the Japanese were letting you know they knew the war was over,
Yeah.
and
Right.
so what happened after that? They were signaling you. Did you ever get ashore there, or?
No, we didn't. We just turned around and came right back out again. And all we did was sweep the harbor and primarily so the Marines or whatever the landing forces could get in there later. And then, as I say, we were there for several days, but going through all these islands and so on, and channels in between the islands and so on. And then we moved over to Japan, and we swept into Sasebo Harbor. And we were outside of there by probably 20 miles or so, and this was a big operation. We had our 8 minesweepers and probably 8 or 10 bigger minesweepers, metal minesweepers, and so on and so forth. And as I say, the wooden minesweepers took turns, and one of them was always in the lead. And then as they spread out, we would have our cutters swinging out like so, and then the 2 other ships would follow us, and with their cutters.
So you were covering a wide area.
We were covering a wide area, and so on, and it was probably 20, 30, maybe more ships in the whole group. And the rest of the minesweepers, which we took our turn at also, were on the back, and we went around and did away with the mines that came up, and we most of them we shot with just plain ordinary rifles.
Oh, really?
And now and then most of them didn't explode because in order to make them explode, you had to hit the pin on the mine, and that was pretty hard to do. But you filled it full of holes that sank, so you ended up, most of them just sank. And
Because you put a rifle hole through them,
yeah,
so you
right.
disrupted their flotation capability.
Right.
When you were sweeping on this wooden YMS, was all of the crew topside? Was that required that the crew be topside for safety, or was the engine? Were there crew in the engine room?
Well, we were during general quarters or something, like when we were doing that, everybody was topside except engine people and so on.
Okay. So you were back below decks at this time because you were an engineering officer.
Well, that's another thing. On a small ship, the engineering officer takes his turn on the deck, and he only goes to the engine room to check what's going on and so on. Most of his work while you're underway is up on the bridge and so on.
Well, your year and a half as a quartermaster served you well as a bridge watch officer then.
Yeah.
The mine sweeping procedure, and I'm sort of asking this for my own edification, you swept in groups as you just described.
Yeah.
So what was the function of the steel-hulled minesweepers that were following you?
Well, they did cut most of the mines, and our job now, I told you that we had cutters and so on, but also our main job, the first minesweeper that went up there, the wooden one, we went along and we dropped depth charges about every minute or two, and that was to explode anything that was so on. And that was an experience to be on a ship that was going. Every time one of those depth charges would explode, the whole rear of your ship would go up like so and back down again, and so on. We're getting close, and so I wanted to get into, as we went into Sasebo Harbor, we got word that this hurricane was coming, or not hurricane, but typhoon, and we moved in there, and we were the first ships into Sasebo Harbor, and we weren't the only ones, but anyway, we tied up the buoys out in the middle of the harbor. There's a harbor similar to San Francisco, and when the typhoon hit, it kept getting worse and worse, and we kept breaking our line. We were tied to buoys, but then several ships together were tied together with lines, and these lines began to break, and so on, and so we had ships floating all over the harbor, just loose, and we got dragged on one side with a landing ship that ripped the whole side of our wooden ship, and just above the water line, and so on. And we, that started about 8 o'clock at night, and about, I think it was 2 o'clock in the morning, we drifted into a small cove, and we dropped 2 anchors, and and we prayed that would hold, and it did. And so anyway, we ended up damaged, and we had to go through into a dry dock, a Japanese dry dock, and so on, and we had experiences like going into, we were there before the Marines or anybody was there, but we weren't allowed to do anything except stay out in the harbor, and later we were able to go in, and but when we went in as a group, and we had sidearms, even though the sidearm didn't have any bullets in them, but so anyway.
So, well, but you were able to go into the Japanese shipyard very soon to get repairs.
That was about a month later.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. And then another typhoon hit us, but at that time we were tied up to a dock, and we rode that one out pretty well, except we had a good bouncing for a long time.
And this was still in Sasebo Harbor?
Yeah, Sasebo. Mm-hmm. And then we brought our ship home. We brought it all the way back to Pearl Harbor, and then to San Pedro, and up to San Francisco, and up to Seattle, and that's where we decommissioned the ship, and I came home.
So it went into the mothball fleet in Seattle. When you did those transocean trips in such a small craft, that must have been with a group of other ships or escorts?
Yeah.
You operated together?
That's right.
You probably had a mothership or a command ship, like a seagoing tug?
That's
do you
right.
remember, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Seagoing tug?
Mm-hmm. Although I don't remember well, yeah, we did have motherships, but I just not sure about all that. When we came back, there was several of us together, and I think there was a big mothership of some sort, but I don't remember just what.
You got in a lot of miles in the
We
Pacific,
did. Mm-hmm.
flying and traveling in luxurious Liberty ships and YMSs.
Mm-hmm.
So in Seattle, we're into 1946 now, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Early in the year, do you recall when you? Well, I guess that would be when you got out of the Navy. It was May of '46.
Yeah, but actually I left Seattle in April, just before Easter, but April. So, and then they didn't. I guess I had extra leave or something of the sort, and they didn't. If you look at my records, I wasn't taken off active duty till the end of about the 20th or 18th, I think it was, of May.
You mentioned Easter of '46. You left where? Or you were where on Easter at '46?
Well,
Well, you mentioned that just now, and I was just trying to relate that.
I left Seattle on a train and came to Billings on a train, and then down to Whirland, Wyoming, where my aunt and uncle lived, and I got off there, and Easter Sunday.
I was at Okinawa that day.
Is that right?
So, your final duty was, you were actually home when your discharge date came along then?
Yeah.
So you were already back with
Yeah.
So in our very brief few minutes we have left, what about the rest of your career after the Navy? You mentioned you stayed in the reserve and then got too busy to go to your drills. What was happening in that time?
That was interesting. I've had an interesting life. We, of course, I came home and got married and so on and so forth, and worked for a private engineer for a little while and so on. But then I went to work for the Bureau of Reclamation, and that was close by a Riverton project, and so I worked for the Bureau of Reclamation for 20 years, and I moved about 10 times. I went to from Riverton project to the Rio Grande project, and El Paso, and then up to Columbia River Basin project at Cooley Dam, and then back down to Casper, Wyoming, and then to Grand Junction, Colorado, and then I got chosen to go to Ethiopia to work on the Blue Nile. They were checking the water rights for Ethiopia because they were building Aswan Dam.
I was just going to ask you if that was related.
And so on. So was 2 years in Ethiopia working on the Blue Nile water report, and then I came home to Pueblo, Colorado, on the Frying Pan, Arkansas project, and then I went back to Africa again to northern Nigeria, and then came home, and they couldn't find a job for me in the Bureau of Reclamation, so I went to work for the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Washington, D.C., and doing irrigation work and so on. And I worked there about 9 years and retired. And
what reservations were you on when you were with the BIA?
Actually, I wasn't on any reservations.
Well, I mean your projects, not...
Projects?
The projects you were working on were associated with what area, Indian tribal areas?
Yeah, well, the biggest one was the Navajo project in northern New Mexico.
Well, in New Mexico you had the Navajo or the Apache down south, or the rivers, the pueblos along the river.
But anyway, I lost my train of thought.
Well, okay, you just retired from the BIA in Washington, D.C. What year did you retire?
1977.
You got a long retirement.
That's right. And then I came here to Prescott, and I bought a print shop and ran the print shop for about 10 years.
Oh, okay.
And so we finally sold that in 1989, and I've been retired ever since.
Well,
Double retired.
That's really a diverse career, to say the least.
Right.
As a mechanical engineer running print shops.
Well, and that's the odd thing, is that I was a mechanical engineer, that's what I graduated for, but most of my work was civil engineering, actually. Mhm.
Very interesting, very interesting. So, and you traveled all over the West, too, pretty much, or very much, and two
Yeah.
trips to Africa.
2 trips, and we did take some side trips in Africa. I went down to Zanzibar and down to Murchison Falls and in Uganda and so on and so forth, and went through Egypt and went up into Europe to Germany and so on and so forth.
In transit to and from these
Yeah.
assignments in Africa.
That's right. Mhm.
Well, that's great that you can do that on your credit card instead of your billfold.
That's right. uh-huh.
It's a travel account, right?
But anyway, we've been here for 30 years, so
Well, you're practically a native then in Prescott.
Almost.
30 years is a long time
That's
for
right.
anyone to have been here.
Mhm.
Well, we certainly enjoyed talking with you, and this is all very well documented, and we'll go to the Library of Congress. Patsy, any more questions? You got about a minute there.
George, if you had the opportunity of talking to some young people today, some of our high school or college students, is there any message you'd like to leave with them concerning your experiences in the military, and certainly having lived and worked overseas, about the world situation, or how you see things today?
I will say that when you've been overseas and so on, you have a different attitude than a lot of people who have not had the opportunity to see things outside of their own realm. And also we are very, well, we're not super religious, but we've always been on that side of the thoughts and so on. And I would say that I think that people sometimes get too self-centered and don't understand what's really going on around them.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you.